How does a company go from losing nearly $12 billion to making a profit of over $2 billion in just 1 year? Well, that's exactly what Boeing did in 2025. Today, we're going to break down the key strategic moves that made this incredible turnaround happen. If you're an investor or just interested in high-stakes business strategy, you're going to want to stick around.
All right, before we get into the really juicy stuff, just a quick and important heads up. Everything we're about to cover is for educational purposes only based on public reports. This should not be considered financial advice.
And here it is, the heart of the story. I mean, just look at these numbers. It's a case of financial whiplash. In 2024, Boeing was in the red by almost $12 billion. 1 year later, they've completely flipped the script to a $2.2 billion profit. That is a $14 billion swing. So the question is, how on earth did they pull that off?
Here's our game plan. We'll start with a big picture of this turnaround year. Then we'll zero in on the single biggest reason for that massive profit swing. After that, we'll look at a key acquisition they made, see how each part of the business performed, and wrap up with the foundation for their future, that giant backlog. Okay, first up, let's just appreciate the scale of this journey. From deep in the red all the way back into the black. It's pretty remarkable. Now, you might be thinking this was just some clever accounting, but these numbers tell a different story. Revenue hit its highest point since 2018 at $89.5 billion. And maybe more importantly, they delivered 600 commercial airplanes, also the most since 2018. That shows the production lines were seriously getting back on track. This wasn't just moving numbers around. It was a real operational comeback. But still, even with factories humming, that $14 billion swing is just huge. There has to be more to it, right? Well, there was. It turns out there was one massive single event that was the real game changer here.
So what was it? What was the one thing that had the biggest impact on Boeing's bottom line in 2025?
$9.6 billion. This number right here, this is the key that unlocks the whole story. It accounts for the vast majority of that swing back to profitability.
So where did this massive pile of cash come from? It wasn't from selling more planes. Nope. This was a huge gain they made by selling off their digital aviation solutions business. It was a really smart, calculated move. They got rid of an asset that wasn't core to their main mission, which brought in a ton of cash and let them refocus on what they do best, building airplanes safely and efficiently. It basically reset their finances for the year. So, that sale was a huge short-term win. But at the same time, Boeing was making another massive move, and this one was all about the long game. This brings us to the acquisition of Spirit AeroSystems. Why buy Spirit AeroSystems? Well, it boils down to one word: control. Spirit builds the fuselages for many of their planes, an absolutely critical part. By buying them, Boeing brought a huge piece of its supply chain inside the company. This was all about getting a direct handle on quality and making their production process more stable and predictable. And you don't just have to take my word for it. The CEO, Kelly Ortberg, said it himself. He connected the deal directly to rebuilding trust. So this wasn't just a business transaction. It was a very public statement that safety and quality were their top priorities. All right, so we've got the two big strategic moves, one for cash, one for control. Now, let's pop the hood and see how each part of the company actually performed during this wild year. Wow, just look at the commercial airplanes division. A 72% jump in deliveries. That is a massive increase. Revenue followed right along, soaring 82%. This is the clearest sign you can get that the factories were finally starting to fire on all cylinders again. Meanwhile, the defense, space, and security side of the house was a rock of stability. Revenue grew nicely, for sure, but the real story here for any investor is that backlog. It swelled to $85 billion. That's years of guaranteed, predictable work locked in with government contracts. Now, global services is interesting. You look at revenue and it seems kind of flat, right? But then your eyes drift down to operating earnings and whoa, it just exploded. And now we know exactly why. That's where that massive $9.6 billion gain from the asset sale shows up on the books. You have to connect those two dots to see the whole picture. Okay, let's get to the grand finale. And for any investor watching, this might be the single most important number we talk about today, the backlog. If you're not familiar, just think of it as a giant, locked-in pile of future revenue from orders that are already signed. So, after selling a business, buying a supplier, and getting production ramped up, what does the pipeline of future work actually look like? Just how secure is this company for the years ahead? The answer is $682 billion. That's the value of their total backlog at the end of 2025. It's a record high. For anyone trying to gauge the long-term health of this company, that number speaks volumes.
To put that number into perspective, it includes firm orders for over 6,100 commercial jets. That's an absolute mountain of work that will keep the lights on and the assembly lines moving for years and years to come. And here's how that breaks down. Yeah, commercial airplanes are the lion's share. No surprise there. But what's really important is that the defense and global services backlogs are also at record levels. That gives them this really solid, diverse foundation to build on. So let's bring it all home. What are the key takeaways? First, 2025 was a massive, dramatic turnaround. Second, that huge profit swing was supercharged by that $9.6 billion sale. Third, buying Spirit Aerosystems was a strategic bet on long-term quality and stability. And finally, all of this is sitting on top of a record-breaking $682 billion backlog, pointing to a very strong future. When you step back and look at it, Boeing's 2025 recovery was all about two things: a bold financial move to study the shift right away, and a fundamental operational change to build a stronger, more resilient company for the future. The big question now is, can they keep that momentum going? I hope you found this breakdown of Boeing's turnaround valuable. If you did, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more videos. Thanks for watching.